We have over 100 marketing KPIs, but there are 4 that I believe are the most important.
Can you tell our audience exactly what a KPI is?
It's an extra $100 in your pocket. You'll study something and you'll have a hypothesis and you'll get proved wrong. And then you change your marketing and you're way ahead of the competition.
Everything except the law will begin after a brief word from Answering Legal. Visit answeringlegal.com to learn more about our virtual receptionist team.
I would absolutely, without question, recommend Answering Legal to every law firm, not one law firm, but every law firm out there. I've gotten so much business as a result of hiring them. I knew that we were getting a lot of calls after hours. So I needed a company to answer those phone calls live and to get the name, number, because that's key information. All my cases are called back. Answering Legal is the best.
Hey everyone, welcome to a special live episode of Answering Legal's Everything Except the Law podcast. We're coming to you from our law firm summer reboot camp event. I'm your host, Nick Werker. If this is your first time tuning in, this is the podcast where we share expert advice on all the parts of running a law firm that attorneys weren't exactly trained for back in law school. Now, I'm sure everyone here has heard of KPIs. Some lazy individuals out there might just label it as a buzzword or, fancy industry jargon, but the truth is that they can be incredibly valuable to a growing law firm. My guest today will help back me up on that point. He is the CEO and founder of the GOLDLAW personal injury law firm and the creator of the 7-Figure Attorney Summit. He knows a ton about managing a law practice, and today he will be sharing the KPIs he thinks lawyers should really be focusing in on. Craig Goldenfarb joins me now. Thank you so much for being here, Craig. I really appreciate it. You're one of our final panelists here at camp, and it's nice to close it out with a bang.
Thanks so much, Nick. Happy to be here.
So, Craig, for those who might not be familiar with you or your work, can you briefly introduce yourself, what you do, where you come from, all that?
Sure. I'm the CEO of a law firm in Florida called GOLDLAW. We're branded as that name because it's part of my name. And we practice all throughout Florida. I had my own firm. This is my own firm for about 25 years. And we currently have a little over 80 employees and about 11 attorneys, and it's personal injury. And I myself, my hobby is that I speak across the country and hold seminars on how to create a business from your law firm and make sure it's run like a business. Because at the end of the day, it is a business, and that's the first mindset shift that a lot of lawyers have to make. So I teach changing that mindset so we can transform your law firm into a business.
That's awesome. So before we dive deeper here, can you tell our audience exactly what a KPI is?
Sure. KPI is a fancy jargon term for a key performance indicator. The rest of us would know that as a metric or a data point. It's any piece of information that can have a number attached to it. So basically, it's just a number or data point about your business.
Awesome. So how much has the tracking of KPIs boosted your practice over the years?
I think it's really the backbone of my law firm is tracking numbers. Now, I happen to like numbers, so I talk to a lot of law firm owners who hate Excel spreadsheets and hate numbers. So I always say that my first piece of advice is there's got to be someone in your firm, or you got to hire somebody who likes tracking numbers, because if you don't have that, you're basically just pissing in the wind, so to speak, with your business, and you're not really tracking anything, and you're not running a business, you're running a law firm, and there is a big difference. So KPIs are necessary to track in any company, especially a law firm, and it's either got to be you or someone that you delegate that to.
So what are some of the more interesting things you've learned about your firm over the years from the tracking of your KPIs? And has doing so helped you identify key strengths and weaknesses within your practice? Like, what have you been able to do with this data?
Well, the first thing is a general idea that has been in several books, that people like keeping score. It's just a human nature, and they want to know the rules of the game. And if they don't know the rules, like how to keep score, they're not engaged anymore. So a good example that's used in a book that many books, one of them is Fireproof by Mike Morse, which talks about KPIs.
Good book.
Is the scoreboard at a football game. So if you go to a football game and the score is whatever it is, and it's halftime and they shut the scoreboard off, they just shut it off, you'd see that many people would leave because there's no way of figuring out who's winning and losing. So the engagement of the human psyche is tied to figuring out if you're winning or losing. And people like that as a driver to see What are you being measured up against? What are the rules? If you have a paralegal and she doesn't know in doing her work how she's being measured, or what is the goal? Is it speed? Is it money? What's her goals? If she doesn't know the rules, or he, then they're not going to be able to be engaged and perform. So the first thing I learned about KPIs really was that people like them. People like being measured and people like rules, because if you don't know how to play the game, you're not going to be interested in playing the game. So the first thing I really learned was that this is something that people like. That's what I learned. And then to identify key strengths and weaknesses, yes, absolutely. There are some people who don't like playing a game. And those people might not belong on your bus being your law firm. So if you run a business based on numbers, I had one lawyer quit because he refused to be measured, because he was a real big intellect and he liked writing memos. And we were measuring him on cases settled. So he was in the wrong seat in our office. He could have been an appellate attorney in our office because he just liked writing, but he didn't like numbers. He didn't like being measured. So since we didn't have room for an appellate attorney, he quit, because we wanted him to handle cases and conclude cases and be measured. So that's an interesting thing, is there may be people at your company that don't like games, don't like being measured, and they don't belong in your company.
I like the way that you explain that it's part of a game, because part of what I do in my business is like gamification of sales. Like, we have obviously thousands of law firms that we answer for across the country, and we try to gamify onboarding them, right? Like, one of the certain things that you can do is like incentive-based gamification, right? Like, if the certain amount of onboarding that you do for interested law firms, you get an incentive, which is, I don't know, it could be a monetary incentive. It could be an extra paid day off. It could be anything like that. But gamification is one of those, I'll call them, again, buzzwords, but I like how you describe using KPIs as a game.
Yeah, we gamify almost every KPI, to be honest. We have an incentive program for all 80. I think we have 82 employees. One of our initiatives for 2023 last year was to make sure every single employee, including receptionists, administrative workers, etc., office services, that they all had incentive-based programs, and we make them all into a game. So it makes it fun, it makes it challenging, and we gamify every single incentive program in our office.
So my wife would be terrified of that, because she likes to say that she's not competitive, but she just went out and bought tennis rackets and told me that she's going to kick my ass at tennis, which she might, because I'm very out of shape. But when it comes to the marketing side of a law firm, there are a ton of potential KPIs for attorneys to track. But which marketing KPIs do you think law firms should really be honing in on?
Sure, that's a great question. We have over 100 marketing KPIs in our company, but there are 4 that I believe are the most important, and they are related to sales. They're sales type KPIs, because at the end of the day, we're all trying to get clients to sign our contract. So that is a sale, and if your mind can't wrap yourself around that, then that's a mindset shift that you should make, because intake is a sale. And my intake director came from a sales floor. And the first 2 months, he kept referring to every signed contract as a deal. And it was really kind of funny, because we had to get that word out of his mouth, because signing a contract for a lawyer is not a deal. It's like, I got 12 deals this week. And it was kind of funny. So, but it is a deal. It's a contract. It's a client. Mm-hmm. So the 4 that I find to be most important, the first one is called leads. Leads is from any source, whether it's a phone call, internet, any way you get leads. A lead is a potential client calling about your services. And it can be any type of reach out to you at all. So that's a lead. The second would be a qualified lead. A qualified lead is a client that you want. So if you're a personal injury attorney and someone calls about a real estate closing, that is a lead, but it's not a qualified lead, because you don't do real estate. A general guide for personal injury firms, at least, is that 40% of your leads should be qualified leads. So that means your marketing is kind of working, because if they're just calling about real estate, then it means you're marketing wrong, because you're a personal injury attorney. So a good general guideline is 40% of your leads should be qualified leads. So the first 2 are leads and qualified leads. The third is contracts signed, or some people call them sign-ups. So that's when you get the client to sign your contract. So you succeeded in the sale. So a contract signed would be KPI number 3. So we're getting a narrower and narrower funnel as we go down this pipeline. And then the third is your conversion rate. It's called your ECR, your effective conversion rate. And what that means is, of the qualified leads, how many did you successfully sign up? And that gives a lot of data. Most law firms that measure this, like me, have at least 90% as a goal. Our goal for this year was 96%, which means of the cases that we want to get a signature on 96% of those. And we're hitting that right now, which means something good about your intake team, that they're empathetic, that they're good salespeople, that they're quality, that they're handling the job of what a lawyer might want to do. And none of my intake people are lawyers. I've completely sourced it to my intake team, which is in-house, but they're all salespeople. I hired them from sales floors. So those 4 KPIs for marketing are leads, qualified leads, contracts signed, and then your ECR, your effective conversion rate. I think those are the most important marketing KPIs.
So I want to hone in on the final one and ask you more about intake. So in order to increase your effective conversion rate, like say there's people out there watching this right now that are like, okay, I know I get leads. I know I can count my leads. I know that I can determine what is a qualified lead. And so I can count my qualified leads out of my leads. And then I get my qualified lead ratio. Then I know I can get, the number of leads that I've signed, and my effective conversion rate is 50%. What are some things that you would encourage those people to do regarding their intake in order to get their effective conversion rate higher?
Well, one further piece of data that you can have is your effective conversion rate per person. You measure it by each person. So if Steven's doing a great job and he's above 90%, he may be fine. But if Marcia has a 50% conversion rate, she may not be. So one further drilling point on this data is do it person by person. Now, some people have one intake person, so you only have to measure one. But what I did is I hired a company that I found to be excellent that trains just intake. And they specialize on personal injury. And there's about 3 companies in the United States who do this, and they're all pretty good. There's a guy in New York, I think, Gary Falkowitz. There's Stacy Mullins, Intake Conversion and Experts. And then there's a third one, Brooke Berkey, called Level Up Consulting. So those are the 3. I use Brooke Berkey, Level Up Consulting, and she'll come in and she'll train your entire team on empathy, compassion, and all the human factors that go into sales. Even without having to know your product, it doesn't matter, because what the person is looking for is help and compassion and empathy. So that's basic sales training, which law firms, they didn't care about this until about 5-10 years ago. They didn't even realize that intake is sales and that you don't have to know law. So what's funny about my office is, as I said, I hired a sales director that used to be in a call center, and now he calls them deals. And all the 6 people I have in my intake department came from call centers for professional services. In other words, they were selling contracts for bug companies or whatever, but they came off a sales floor. So these people like headphones, they like conversions, and they like people. So if they're empathetic, they can close. So I completely transformed who I hired in intake from people who knew something about law to people who knew something about sales and were compassionate. So I thought that shift made a big difference. My ECR went up from about 70% to over 95%.
I come from that world, so I identify with those people. I used to be a headset wearing, walk around. And I do love people, and I love talking to people, so I have evolved my job into getting to do this podcast. So I get to talk to people like you. But what are some other client-related KPIs that you think lawyers should know about? And can you recommend any in the areas of client acquisition, client development, client satisfaction, anything like that?
So I'll start with client acquisition. So client acquisition, obviously, is how you get your cases. So I have a system we'll talk about in a bit that puts all this data in a pie chart, a pie graph. So you get a percentage from each type of referral source, whether it's clients or television, billboards, but whatever, referrals, etc. So your cost per case, your acquisition cost per case, is a very important KPI. And let me tell you what that means. So if you spend $1 million on marketing, $1 million, and you get 100 cases, well, then your cost per case is $1 million divided by 100, which is whatever that costs, $10,000 per case, whatever the math is. So that's your overall cost per case. So it costs you in that scenario $10,000. Did I do my math right? 100 times 1,000 equals $1 million, or no, 100,000. So it's actually 100,000 per case, I think. So that's horrible. So you just divide your total marketing cost by the number of cases you signed up, and that's your average cost per case. In personal injury, a goal would be around $2,000 per case. That's a little high. It used to be less, but now, with cost of everything going up, about $2,000 per case is a pretty good acquisition cost per case. So you figure that out globally. In other words, your total marketing spend divided by the number of cases you signed up for a year. Then you can drill down even further, which is your acquisition cost per case per referral type. So, for example, I do television ads as a personal injury attorney. So I can take all my TV cases that came in from TV, look at my total spend on television for that year, divide by the number of cases that I got from television, and now I have an acquisition cost per case for one referral type. So I can figure out if it's worth me staying on television. So you can do that and drill down for every type of referral type that you spend money on. So acquisition cost per case is a super important marketing KPI in case acquisition. In client satisfaction, I use several KPIs. One of them would be Google reviews. And we very actively solicit Google reviews as a KPI for client satisfaction. And we've gamified the hell out of that. It is super fun at our office. And every single employee gets bonused and gifts and money and fun stuff for getting their friends and relatives and themselves and vendors and clients. It's not just clients. We have a huge list of people that we want Google reviews from. And they earn quite a bit of money off that. The employees do. So Google reviews is the first. And the second is the aggressive use of client surveys. So client surveys give you back data as far as a score of 1 to 5 on certain things. So because it's a score, you can see what kind of scores you're getting from your clients at different points in the case. So that's a KPI, is your client satisfaction scores. So client satisfaction, I would say Google reviews and client surveys.
So increasing productivity is obviously a top goal for many law firms these days. How can KPIs be used to achieve that goal, like increasing productivity?
Sure. Well, if nobody knows what the KPIs are, then they're not going to get done. So there's an old phrase dealing with KPIs. If it gets measured, it gets done. So if you don't measure something, people aren't going to necessarily pay attention to it. And the corollary to that is if you pay them for it and give them an incentive, it gets done even better. So not only should you measure, but you pay people to reach those goals. Now I pay out 6 figures or more, probably $200,000 a year on my KPIs. That's a ton of money. But when I look at the return on investment, the ROI on those KPIs, if they all hit the numbers that justify me paying out $200,000, my ROI is about 7 to 1 or 8 to 1 on that. So why would you not put some money behind the things that make you money? Because you're going to get a great ROI. So every department has its different KPIs. So KPIs can be used to achieve your goals, which are usually based on profits or money or cases settled or cases closed or the speed by which cases get resolved, by putting money behind them. So we spent at least 2 years refining all our KPIs to meet goals that have a high ROI for my company. So we use KPIs to drive the company. Like I said before, it's the backbone of our structure.
Are there any other KPIs that you'd like to highlight today that have been beneficial to your firm over the years?
Yes, I have 2 that I'd like to bring out. So if you're a personal injury attorney, and I don't know how many people on the line here are personal injury attorneys, probably many. There's a KPI I stole from John Morgan of Morgan & Morgan. I assume most of the people have heard of Morgan & Morgan. It's called a tender rate. Now, for those who do personal injury, you know when the insurance company pays the policy limits, one word that's used is tender. They tendered their policy limits. So that's 10,000, 25,000, whatever it is. So John Morgan came up with the theory of that the goal of every case, if a client needs surgery or if a client can increase the value of the case, the goal of every case is to get a tender, is to get the policy limits. So we started measuring how often our case managers, our paralegals, our lawyers were getting a tender. As soon as we started measuring that, I saw that we were about a 30% tender rate. That's pretty awful. So it meant we weren't medically managing our cases to make sure clients got the treatment or surgeries they needed. Once we put in a medical management program where we make sure our clients get the recommended medical care, it went up to above 75%. 75%. That increased my pre-suit department's income by about $2 to $3 million. And that was by measuring one KPI, which was tender rate. So as I said, what gets measured gets done. We measured it, and then we put rewards behind tenders. So if you get X percent tenders for your month, you get money. So when you start to measure things like tender rate, boy, it goes crazy. It's wonderful because then your profits go up because you're measuring it and you're rewarding it. We even did a reward for quickest tender. And for those who do PI, sometimes you send just the operative report to the insurance adjuster and you get a tender within 7 minutes. So we gave an extra $100 to the quickest tender for the month, whoever got it quick. So then we're bonusing speed and efficiency, which is something we want. So there'd be a huge competition. Someone got a tender in 7 minutes after they sent a letter. Someone got a tender in 4 minutes. It's really fun. That's a game. It's an extra $100 in your pocket. So we gamify tender rate a lot and we focus on it in pre-suit. So that's the first one, is tender, which most lawyers don't do. The second would be your average fee per case. Your average fee per case globally is important. So you take all your fees for the year and divide it by the number of cases you dispersed on. That's your average fee per case. I divide it differently. I also do pre-suit separately from lit because I think pre-suit and personal injury is a very different animal than lit, and the fee per case is very different. I assume your fee per case in lit is a lot higher. So I measured it out pre-suit versus lit, and the firms that I know that combine it, it's a meaningless metric. If you have average fee per case combined pre-suit and lit, to me, it's not very good. It's not drilled down enough. So in my pre-suit department, our average fee per case goal is $15,000. So that would mean the case settled for $45,000 because we're a third fee in Florida. So that means our average settlement in pre-suit, just pre-suit, is $45,000 with a fee of $15,000. In litigation, since we're a high-end law firm and we only file suit on pretty high-end stuff, our average fee per case is over $100,000. Now, what that means, since we're 40% in Florida, is that our average litigation case settles for $250,000. 40% of that is $100,000. So measuring your average fee per case pre-suit and litigation, to me, is crucial. You got to know. It's just like how much profit you earn per product if you're selling products. Every business owner knows your profit margin. That's called your profit margin. In a law firm, your profit margin is how much is your average fee per case. So, and I want to take that one further, if you don't mind, Nick. I further divide that down per case type. So I measured about 10 years ago, I had a hypothesis. The hypothesis was that I earn a higher fee on car accident cases than slip and falls. That was my hypothesis, and I didn't know. So once we did this analysis, to my surprise, here in Florida, I found out our average fee per case in slip and falls was higher than car accidents. And I looked at the competitive landscape, and all the billboards in Florida are advertising for car accidents. Yet I'm earning a higher fee on slip and falls. So what did I do? I put $1 million into marketing both on TV and billboards slip and falls, and everybody made fun of me. Why? Because there's some perception that slip and falls are not serious, and some lawyers won't do them because, we don't want to do slippies. They just want to do car accidents. It's some weird prejudice they have against slip and falls. And I said, you're right, guys. They're silly. Send them all to me. And it increased my profits significantly because I did the data and I found out that slip and falls paid me more per case than auto. That's the magic of KPIs. You'll study something and you'll have a hypothesis and you'll get proved wrong. And then you change your marketing to meet what you just found out, and you're way ahead of the competition because you're the only guy in town who knows that slip and falls pay better than car accidents. So you can tell how into KPIs I am and how I make very important and expensive decisions based on the data.
That is so impressive. We're talking about KPIs. The question that I wanted to ask Craig is, because he studies these KPIs and does such incredible things with data, what tools does your firm use to track the data for each of these KPIs?
Well, the first point is that you need to have a software system that contains your data for your type of case. So in personal injury, there's several. There's Filevine, Litify, Smart Advocate, etc. I happen to use Filevine. I love Filevine. And Filevine has a partner product that they call Domo, also known as Periscope, that takes data from Filevine and then puts it into charts and graphs. So I call Domo the charts and graphs program. So I can measure my KPIs on what I call a dashboard. And my dashboard has about 100 to 200 KPIs on it that I have up on a big screen TV on my wall. It's like a third monitor, a computer monitor, but it's 65 inches like your big screen TV at home. So the first and major platform I use for measuring KPIs is my client management program called Filevine, and the section of Filevine called Periscope, also known as Domo. So Litify has that as part of its program. And Smart Advocate has that also, that capability as part of its program. I suggest that whatever software program you use, that you buy one with the capability to display the data in charts and graphs. So that's the first tool I use. The second is I run my law firm on a system called EOS, Entrepreneurial Operating System. And it also has a software called 90.io. And within that platform, you also track your KPIs. And there are different types of KPIs. They're more administrative KPIs. So we use that to track KPIs as well. So that's called 90.io. And that works with Entrepreneurial Operating System, which is a way of running your company. And the third method I use is simple Excel spreadsheets. Now, we try to not use Excel spreadsheets much. And the reason is because these other two things, they grab the data automatically, Domo, Periscope, and 90. They grab the data from your program. So there's no manual inputting required. When you use Excel spreadsheets, a person has to type that in, and oftentimes there's going to be errors. The formula may be messed up. The human being who typed it in made a typo and typed the wrong number. So I try to stay away from Excel unless I'm doing formula-based analysis. And that's why we do use Excel, because it's the best program that we know of to do things based on formulas when you have to add columns and divide and stuff like that. So those are the three tools I use. And if you're a personal injury law firm and you're not using some data measuring part of your software, it's going to be really challenging to do data and to do KPI measurement.
So how often does your firm analyze KPI results, and what does that analysis process look like?
So what's neat about these programs is that you can make settings so that they can send the report to your email every regulated amount of time. For instance, I have about 5 reports I get automatically, and so does most of my leadership team. So my legal department gets a report. It's the statute of limitations report every week, which is which cases are within a year of us blowing the statute of limitations. That's an important report, right? And if it can be automated and show up in your inbox every Monday or once a month, then that's a way of it being, you don't have to remember to check it. It's going to show up. So I like the one-way street of some of these software programs where they automatically send you the report. So what was your question again, Nick? Because that was a partial answer.
How often do you analyze the KPI results,
Sure.
and then what does that analysis process look like?
Well, what's interesting is I have what's called my dashboard, and once a month I go over every single card data point in my dashboard, and that takes about an hour. But all of my leaders and managers are responsible for their own dashboard, so they can each set up the KPIs that are important to them. For me, since I haven't handled a case in 15 years, I don't deal with a lot of legal issues or cases or statute of limitations. So my COO, my Chief Operating Officer, and my CLO, my Chief Legal Officer, get the report on statute of limitations. I don't. I have 2 very highly skilled leaders who are in charge of making sure we don't blow any statute of limitations. So if all your leaders have different dashboards, they can check them on any regular basis they want to. I check once a month, but I check what I call the mega KPIs, which are the overall arching things like profits and revenue and number of cases, number of signups. Those are mega KPIs, which I've also nicknamed the desert island KPIs, which is if you're on a desert island and you only had 1 minute of cell service and they had to tell you how your firm's doing in that 1 minute, which data points would you need to know? And it's only about 5. And then you lose your cell service, but at least you know that you're going to die on the island, but at least you know that your company was in good hands. So I call those desert island KPIs because I can learn them in about a minute and I can realize we're doing okay for the year or we're not. So I check every month. Every leader has their own dashboard and they check it as frequently as they do, as long as they get stuff done.
So if any lawyers listening to this want to connect with you further, how can they do so?
Well, my email is fine. I do respond to emails. cgoldenfarb@goldlaw.com. cgoldenfarb@goldlaw.com. But another way to hear me for a whole day, if you're interested in what you heard, is I do seminars across the country on running your law firm like a business. And the website, if you want to put it in the chat, is 7figureattorney.com. And that's spelled out, not the number 7. It's SEVEN, 7figureattorney.com. And our next event is April 24th in Orlando. And that's a full day and a half of me and some of my leaders talking about how to run your law firm like a business, and we've done it almost 10 years. Very well attended, and I don't talk about law, zero. I talk about how to run a business so it's a successful business, because I don't introduce myself as a lawyer anymore. When I'm on an airplane, Nick, someone says, "What do you do?" I say, "I'm the CEO of a law firm." And that's my identity. That's who I want to be. I was a good lawyer. I was a trial lawyer, but I found over time my identity was more in, I call it running shit. I like controlling. I like being a CEO. I like business building. So I shifted about 15 years ago from a lawyer to a CEO. And so to hear about that transition, you might want to attend my seminar, Orlando, April 24th of 2025, sevenfigureattorney.com.
Love it. Well, I'd like to thank Craig Goldenfarb for joining me on the show today, and thank you to all of our listeners. We hope you enjoyed this conversation, and we will be back with another episode of Everything Except the Law soon. Be sure to check out previous episodes of our show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and the Answering Legal YouTube channel. Links to everything covered in today's conversation can be found in the description of this episode, including the sevenfigureattorney.com. See you next time, everyone.